Hello and welcome to the beginning of a brand new series, the competitive biography of Emanuel Lasker. In this series, we will be taking a look at all of the games, matches, and tournaments played by second world champion and mathematics PhD Emanuel Lasker, ranging from his first ever master tournament in 1889 up until his first ever World Chess Championship match in 1894. We've got a lot to cover over the course of this series, so I think it'd be best if we get started right away. Our journey begins in the year 1889, which in itself was a rather large year for chess. The second ever World Chess Championship match was played between Wilhelm Steinitz and Mikhail Chigorin. The New York tournament of 1889 helped select Isidor Günzburg as the next challenger to the title, and the 6th German Chess Federation Congress cemented Siegbert Tarrasch as the strongest player from Germany. Now, it is at this Chess Federation Congress held in the city of Breslau, which is modern-day Wrocław, Poland, that we are interested, not in the master tournament that Tarrasch won, but in the so-called Hauptturnier, or a Class B tournament. The appeal of this tournament was that it was open to German natives only, and the winner of the tournament, in addition to the cash prize, of course, would be considered a master in the German circles. On screen, I will post the competitors in this tournament. If you don't recognize any of the names beside Lasker, don't worry, neither did I at first. The players were split up into the two groups you see here. The top 4 players from each group move on to the final group, which will determine the winner of the overall tournament. Now, because very few games from this tournament were actually recorded, we're jumping into this tournament at round number 5. For a brief recap, Lasker won his first 3 games, and then in round number 4 he was held to a draw by the man in second place, Lorenzo Mabilis. Now, in round number 5, Lasker is going up against Dr. Albin Reif. Reif is certainly no stranger to the competitive scene. There is evidence of him playing against Paul Morphy back in New York in 1857. As far as these Hauptturniers are concerned, Reif finished 4th place at the tournament in Leipzig 1879, 4th place again at the Berlin tournament in 1881, and it was only at the Nuremberg tournament of 1883 that he failed to make it out of his first group. So Reif is certainly an experienced competitor, and we're going to see if age triumphs over youth today. Without further ado, Dr. Albin Reif with the white pieces opened with f4, the bird's opening. Now Lasker responded with one of the more topical openings of the time, e5. This is the Fromm's gambit. F captures on e5, and now Lasker already plays a very unique move, f6. Now this move marks the Lasker gambit. Yes, we are starting with an opening named after the player we're covering. If you've never seen the Fromm's gambit before, the main line continues d6 instead, and after e captures d6, bishop captures d6, and knight to f3, black has mostly played g5 or knight to f6, though other moves like bishop to g4, knight to c6, and even knight to h6 have been tried with varying levels of success. But Lasker instead plays f6, and Reif accepts the gambit with e captures on f6. Now, white can instead transpose into one of the better King's Gambit declined lines by playing e4, and here black's best move is knight to c6, which marks the so-called Soller-Zilbermintz gambit. And again, if you've never heard of that before, don't worry, neither have I. But Reif accepts the gambit with e captures on f6, and believe it or not, this move is a novelty. It is move 3, and we are already playing a position that has never been repeated again in recorded master games. Lasker, of course, retakes with the knight. We have knight to f3 from Reif, and now the benefit of playing f6 over d6 is that black can immediately play the move d5. This pawn is protected by both the knight and the queen, so it's a very strong central pawn. Reif plays e3. We have knight to c6, and now already something of an accuracy, bishop to b5. This move doesn't really do too much. Black's going to be castling right away, so this superficial pin is not really going to be doing too much. We're going to be very nitpicky because this is a very short game. Best for white is probably to establish a pawn in the center with d4, and the bishop can stay at home to meet any sort of bishop to g4 ideas with bishop to e2. But bishop to b5 was played. Lasker plays bishop to d6, he's ready to castle, and now Reif, seeing that his pin on the knight is about to be broken, decides to simply trade it off with bishop captures on c6 with check. Fundamentally, you would think that this is a pretty good move. Given that Reif is up a pawn, he would want to be trading pieces as much as possible. but the problem is that he's going to be getting attacked too much. Again, Reif should consider the fundamental move like d4, and after both players castle, if black plays a6, now you could consider trading on c6, although bishop to d3 also looks strong. Now white would have ambitions of playing knight to c3 and e4. This would probably be a much more reasonable idea. But okay, bishop captures on c6 with check, b captures c6, castles and castles. So let's take stock of the current position. Reif is still up a pawn, but he is very far behind in development, as neither of these pieces have moved, and none of them can develop until Reif starts moving a pawn. So he decides to play the move pawn to b3. This is a sensible way to develop the bishop, given that there's this pawn on e3, though it does encourage Lasker to play very aggressively with the move knight to g4. Now the problem with this move is that if white plays bishop to b2, black gets off a very strong attack, starting with rook captures on f3. Rook captures f3, and now bishop captures on h2 with check. King to h1 walks into too many queen to h4 ideas, so white would play king to f1, and now black can simply drop the bishop back to d6, and there are threats like knight to h2 check in the air. This is very hard to meet, and white would definitely not be for choice, despite the material advantage. Reif instead decides to deal with this by playing h3, and while knight to f6 is certainly a reasonable move, and black would still be doing perfectly fine here, Lasker, of course, plays the most aggressive response, queen to f6, counterattacking this rook here on a1. Now, how do you defend against this counterattack? Reif decides to play the move c3, and in most cases, c3 and d4 would be evaluated about the same, in that they both lose on the spot for white. Now, white can really only afford to play the move knight to c3, but the reasons for that will have to be explained after we take a look at the following moves. So with c3 on the board, it's black to play and win. There are a handful of moves that give black a definite advantage here, but try to find the most puzzle-like solution. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Here, Lasker played the move knight to h2. Now this comes with threats on two very tender points in white's camp. If you attempt to save the exchange with rook to f2, then bishop captures on h3 comes in, and of course if you take this, then you've lost your defender of the knight. And in either case, the white king just gets ripped to shreds here. And if you play the move that Reif played, which is knight captures on h2, then we have the very straightforward deflection tactic, bishop captures on h2 with check, king captures on h2, and queen captures on f1. Now it was here on move 13 that Albin Reif resigned the game. Now let's take a look at why. The queen trade is pretty much forced. If you move the queen out of the way, then black is simply playing rook to f2 and white's just going to get checkmated. There's not really much of a game to play there. So queen captures on f1 and rook captures on f1. And now we see the unfortunate state of white's queenside pieces. If one of them develops, let's say knight to a3, then the other one is pinned. And so they're going to have to spend time playing bishop to b2, probably trading on a1, and this is just not great. Otherwise, black is going to be simply playing bishop to f5, followed by bishop to e4, rook to f2, and again, it's the white king that's getting assaulted, while the pieces are in no state to defend it. Now, I said only a couple moves ago that knight to c3 was the only way to block this attack on the rook. And now we can see why. After black plays the same moves, knight to h2, knight h2, bishop h2, king h2, queen f1, now you don't have to trade the queens right away, but you can instead play bishop to a3. This is a nice intermezzo. And now white gets decent compensation for the exchange. For example, let's trade on d1, queen d1, rook d1. Black escapes the attack with rook to f2, and now bishop to c5. White actually enjoys the better pawn structure, and the presence of opposite-colored bishops means that this game could very well be drawn down the line. Of course, the game is far from over at this point, but it's clearly a better position than what Reif would have gotten in the game. So there you go. That is the first game of the Breslau 1889 Hauptturnier covered. There's not going to be too many of these because, again, this wasn't recorded very thoroughly, but we will take any chance we can get to look into the early games of Emanuel Lasker. So yeah, that's game one in the books. We'll see the next one very soon. I hope to see you there.